All right, Shalom. I want to give all the praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai Bahasham Rakak Kwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth, and Shalom to the hopeful elect. The oil shock is about to hit America. And before we watch this video, let's go here. This article is from newstarget.com. The headline reads, it says, the sabotage of global energy infrastructure is intended to starve billions of humans to death. Okay? Let's read the summary here on the left. It says, the premise of engineered sabotage. The author contends that the current energy and supply chain crises are not accidental, but represent a coordinated act of war against humanity. This is Micah chapter 2 and verse 1, and it reads, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hands. Okay, they plan on starving billions to death. Okay, it's all set up. It says targeted infrastructure. Recent fires and explosions at food processing plants and energy facilities such as LNG complexes and refineries are characterized as, quote, special forces style sabotage designed to look like accidents. And they've been doing this for years. Okay, burning down food processing plants, farms. Okay, random explosions, random fires. Okay, it's all orchestrated. Okay, or orchestrated famine and supply chain shortage, right? It says the C-19 precedent. The pandemic is described as a, quote, pilot run used to test public tolerance for supply chain disruptions and state mandated shutdowns. Okay, and that's what they did. Okay, it was all a test on the public. Okay, to see how far they could go. All right, and that's what they did. Okay, people took the bait, you know. It says the objective, scarcity and depopulation. The text asserts that the ultimate goal of destroying the, quote, hydrocarbon base is to eliminate the foundations of modern life, okay? Because they're trying to, they're changing everything into this, we're in that transition of that beast system. Everything's going artificial, right? They want you to depend on them. Right? It says famine is a tool by targeting natural gas, the feedstock for the Haber-Bosch process. The author argues elites are intentionally sabotaging global fertilizer production to trigger mass starvation, right? Financial incentives, governments are portrayed as viewing citizens as unsustainable liabilities. The author suggests that eliminating people, quote, clears the balance sheets of trillion-dollar entitlement obligations in UBI cost. The rise of AI. The selection claims that as AI and robotics replace human labor, the ruling class views the general population as useless, all right, useless eaters, and expendable, all right. And we showed you that yesterday in the lesson that I did yesterday, going into these companies, bringing in these robots, okay, and they're going to replace humans. All right. It says predicted stages of collapse. The author outlines a 3-stage progression toward a managed decline of civilization. Stage 1, current, visible sabotage dismissed by the public as market forces in traditional geopolitical conflict. It says by the public as market forces or traditional geopolitical conflict. Stage 2, imminent, widespread panic due to acute shortages, hyperinflation, and the introduction of government rationing. Right? They're gonna ration the food, the water, everything. As we've been talking about, full control by the elites. The international baking families. Number 3, stage 3, acceptance of a new reality defined by permanent scarcity, loss of mobility, in the end of 20th century abundance. See that? Let me grab a scripture real quick. Okay. 2 Ezra 16:17. Woe was me, who would deliver me in those days? The beginning of sorrows and great mournings, the beginning of famine and great death, the beginning of wars, and the power shall stand in fear. The beginning of evils, what shall I do when these evils shall come? Okay, we're already, as we read, the imminent. All right, stage 2, widespread panic due to acute shortages, hyperinflation, and the introduction of government rationing. All right. Verse 19, behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for amendment. But for all these things, they should not turn from their wickedness, nor be always mindful of the scourges, man. Okay, the setup is right here. Okay, this Iran war, the Strait of Hormuz, okay, the orchestrated famines and shortages. Okay, it says, because we're here, man. All right, the beginning of sorrows. Behold, victuals shall be so good cheap upon earth that they shall think themselves to be in a good case, and even then shall evils grow upon earth. Sword, famine, and great confusion. All right, this is what we're reading about here. It says, for many of them that dwell upon earth shall perish of famine, and the others that escape the hunger shall the sword destroy. All right, so we're talking about billions of people being starved to death, man. All right, this is the prophecy, the judgment of Yahweh Shem Yahushai, right? Is there anything else? Recommended defensive measures because the author views the centralized grid, quote, as a vulnerability and the mainstream media as a propaganda arm. The following survival strategies are suggested. All right. Decentralization, moving away from centralized energy, food, and communication systems. Self-sufficiency, building private farms, securing independent water and energy sources. Tangible assets, exiting the banking system in favor of physical assets like gold and silver, and a risk-free zone. So yeah, and as we've been saying, the Lord is going to have to be with you during this trial, man. All right, as we've been warning you, Jeremiah 28:8. All these things are coming down the pipe. Jeremiah 28:8. The prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries, against great kingdoms of war and of evil and of pestilence, man. All right, NLT. The ancient prophets who preceded you and me spoke against many nations, always warning of war, disaster, and disease. Man, let's get into it here in the video, right? The oil shock is about to hit America.
Okay, so we have to talk about oil and how it's about to affect the entire world, because I think we're being lied to.
Somebody shorted the oil market today by hundreds of millions of dollars exactly 20 minutes before Trump made his announcement that everything was going to be great. And if you see that once, it could be a coincidence. But that's happened at least 3 times, if not more, since the war began. That's a pattern.
The theory is that all of this back and forth about the strait is open, the strait is closed, well then it's open, and now it's closed again, it's actually really easy to explain. It's a way for insiders to manipulate the stock markets. Because last Friday, we were told the Strait of Hormuz was finally open, which is a huge reason why the price of paper oil went way down and the markets rallied to a new all-time high. Only to find out that over the weekend, that's not the case at all. And the strait is still very much closed. And maps are showing a lot of the ships were being routed back, and now no ships are allowed to pass.
Yeah, the beginning of sorrows, as I said, right? This came out yesterday. Collapse.news. Iran's Strait of Hormuz blockade threatens global energy catastrophe. All right, this is what we're going into here. All right. Quick points. Iran threatens a 100-day blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, a critical choke point, handling 20% of global oil trade, risking oil prices surging to $130/barrel and triggering economic chaos. Okay, this is what they want. This is what the elites want. All right. Remember, hey, we're warning you that that chip is on the way. They're getting ready to reset this thing. Okay? Even if tensions de-escalate, the IEA warns it could take 2 years for global oil and gas supplies to recover, with inflation spiraling and supply chains collapsing, right? Europe has just 6 weeks of jet fuel reserves left. Mass flight cancellations loom, with airlines already cutting routes and raising fares, all right? And so let's go back, okay?
Now, there's also a lot of really weird things starting to happen as well. Like, for example, there seems to be a virus that's infecting the world's gas infrastructure. There are now dozens and dozens of energy pipelines that have caught fire or accidentally exploded. And this dates all the way back from March of this year, and it's happening all across the world. And because all of this flow of energy is not allowed to move freely, there are now warnings that the world is about to go through a really bad recession.
The International Monetary Fund is warning of a worldwide recession if the war in the Middle East doesn't end soon. If the conflict drags on, the IMF says energy and food prices will spike higher, stunting economic growth across the globe.
Now hold on, maybe everything will be fine for the US, right? Because we're told that the US is a net exporter of oil. But the reality is that the United States actually imports more crude oil than it exports. And here's the math. We bring in about 6.3 million barrels a day and send out about 4.1 million. That makes us a net importer, aka consumer, of 2.2 million barrels a day. You can't be a net importer of something and also be the world's supplier of it. That math just doesn't make sense. And all of this confusion about how much we actually have or don't have is exactly why the price of oil is two completely different numbers depending on where you look. One of those numbers is the paper price. The other is the price oil actually costs in the real world if a country needs a barrel delivered to it today. And the gap between those two numbers is about $35, which is the biggest spread ever recorded in history.
When we talk about commodities, there is a huge difference between what you see on the screen and how much you pay to get that commodity. So you see the screen, $90 a barrel. Good luck if you get an oil barrel for $90. It's $120, $130, $140, $150, $160 even.
The paper price of oil is what's called Brent futures. That's sitting at around $100 a barrel. If you Google what oil is worth right now, that is the number you're going to be shown. But the physical price, which is what it actually costs to buy a real barrel of oil that gets put onto a real ship and delivered to a real refinery, that costs over $130, depending on the day. That is called dated Brent, which is oil for actual physical delivery 10 to 30 days in the future. Now the question is, why does this gap exist and what does it mean?
Real quick, I had to put up because I like to do the parallels, okay, of what happened back then and what's going on now. So I had the parallels of what happened in Egypt, okay, what's going on in America now with the economy, the shortages, the famines. All right, this is what we got from the chat. But it says, number one, the biblical pattern, Egypt's drought and famine. In the book of Genesis, chapters 41 through 47, during the time of Joseph, Egypt faced a severe, divinely revealed economic cycle. 7 years of abundance, 7 years of famine. Centralized control of grain under Pharaoh. People exchanged money, livestock, land, servitude just to survive, right? And what's heavy is that the modern day Pharaoh, all right, the Edomites, they're controlling, the grain, the fertilizer, all right? Everything, as we were reading earlier in this article here, all right, everything's been sabotaged to starve out billions of people to death. Okay, this is what the global elite are doing, right? Key scriptures: Genesis 41, 29 through 30. All right, 7 years of great plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Genesis 41:54, the famine was in all lands, but in the land of Egypt there was bread. Genesis 47:13 through 15, money failed in Egypt during the famine. All right, we're coming into that time where the money is about to fail in this new spiritual Egypt. Genesis 47:19 through 21. People sold themselves in their land. Pattern: economic collapse, resource scarcity, increased central control. Right. Number 2, modern parallels in America: economic, energy, supply chains. While not identical, you can see structural similarities and trends happening in the United States. Supply chain disruptions, shortages in food, goods, and manufacturing inputs, especially post-pandemic, similar to famine in all lands, Genesis 41:54. Scriptural parallel, Ezekiel 7:15, the sword is without, and the pestilence and famine is within. Let me go to that real quick. Ezekiel 7:15. All right, the judgments of the Lord. All right, and how they're going to play out in this time. Okay. Ezekiel 7:14, they have blown the trumpet, even to make all ready, but none goeth to battle, for my wrath is upon all the multitude thereof. All right, so, twofold, dealing with Jake, but you can apply this to America now, to Babylon, the people of America now. It says the sword is without, and the pestilence and famine is within, right? The sword is without, and the pestilence and the famine within, and he that is in the field shall die with the sword, and he that is in the city, famine and pestilence shall devour him. See? But they that escape of them shall escape, and shall be on the mountains like doves, and of the valleys all of them mourning, every one for his iniquity. All hands shall be feeble, and all knees shall be weak as water. It's going to be a terrible time for people, man. They shall also gird themselves with sackcloth, and horror shall cover them, and shame shall be upon all faces, and baldness upon all their heads, right? Because people are going to be in remorse, all right? Dread and sorrow. Verse 19, they shall cast their silver in the streets, and their gold shall be removed. That's the money, which eventually is going to be cast out. This is why they're ushering in a new digital system. And this war is going to bring that. Their silver and their gold should not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. They should not satisfy their souls, neither fill their bowels, because it is the stumbling block of their iniquity, right? Definition B, economic strain and currency pressure, inflation reducing purchasing power, debt-based system stress, right? Scriptural parallel, Ezekiel 4:16, they shall eat bread by weight and with care, and drink water by measure. That's the rationing that we were talking about. Revelation 6:5 and 6, scarcity economy, a measure of wheat for a penny, right? People don't have the funds, all right, to live day to day. All right, there's no more buying power behind the dollar bill. People can't afford to live on their current wages that they receive from work. Okay, due to hyperinflation. Okay, it says, because that's why things cost more and you receive less. This reflects controlled distribution and inflated costs of necessities, right? It says energy crisis and dependency, food. It says fuel costs, grid concerns, energy insecurity. Energy today equals what grain was in ancient Egypt, a foundational resource. Scriptural principle, Isaiah 19:5-7, about Egypt drying resources leading to economic collapse, all right? And that whole chapter goes into that, man. Okay, the collapse of Egypt. Okay, America, man. All right, let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, so let's go back. That's the point I wanted to read there.
And the reason the gap exists is because the people who need actual oil right now are paying whatever it takes to get it. But the paper market is still pretending everything is fine. How come? The theory is that it's because the paper markets are being used as a mechanism to suppress the price of oil psychologically to calm the markets down. Here's a chart from JP Morgan. It shows that spread going back to 2008. And for almost 20 years, those two prices, paper oil and physical oil, basically moved together. They were maybe $1 or $2 apart, maybe $5 in a crisis, but the gap right now is way outside of anything we've ever seen. And the last time something even close to this happened was during COVID, when oil went negative for a very short time, but that's what economists called a demand collapse, when nobody was buying anything because nobody was traveling. This is the opposite. This is a supply emergency. Now, unfortunately, peace talks and negotiations have failed, which means the war is technically not over. But the White House is taking a victory lap, and the stock market is coming back up. We're told everything is going to be fine, and the US just became the world's gas station again. But the data is telling us something is going very wrong, and I think the worst of it probably hasn't hit us at the gas pump yet. The effects are starting to be felt in different parts of the world, but not in the US yet. So in this video, I want to help explain exactly what I think is going on and when all of this actually starts to affect us at the gas pump and in the stock market. So with that said, let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andre Jick. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the world when it's your turn to be an adult. Do you remember watching Interstellar when they landed on... Now, one energy fund manager I came across put a specific number on the total damage, which is that the world will have lost 780 million barrels over the course of this conflict. Now, for context, the whole US SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, holds about 400 million barrels, but it was already half empty before the war started. So we're talking about losing twice the entire emergency reserves the United States spent decades saving up.
Yeah, this shit about the tank. Okay? The writing's all over the wall. You can watch the rest of that, all right? But it's all going to lead to this. Billions starving, okay? A global energy catastrophe, man. All right? There you have it. You know, so we don't even need to read anything else. We know where this is going. We just read it in 2nd Ezra 16. All right? All these things are the beginning of sorrows, right? 2nd Ezra 16, same chapter. Yep. Verse 37, 2nd Ezra 16:37. Behold, the plagues draw nigh and are not slack, as when a woman with child in the 9th month bringeth forth her son. With 2 or 3 hours of her birth, great pains can pass her womb, which pains when the child cometh forth, they slack not a moment. Okay? Even so shall not the plagues be slack to come upon the earth, and the world shall mourn, and sorrow shall come upon it on every side. All right, there you go. So we know where this is headed, man. All right, and it's going to be terrible. Shalom.